My name is Phil Knox, and this is God's story. In the beginning was the author, the answer to the question not yet posed, solution to a mystery not yet disclosed, liberator to a regime not yet imposed. And there in the background as the story unfolds, holding his run from times of old, waiting as priests, poets and prophets foretold of the author of all love and life and all that is good. And then bang, in a moment that is cosmically linkable, the author becomes unthinkably shrinkable. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Because the author comes down to meet us. The king of the world becomes a fetus. And from Judean hills, the story was broadcast, and some logged on, hooked up, tuned in. And to those who did with a wireless connection, the author promised life and resurrection. Weaving tales, leaving trails, breaking jails, removing scales from people's eyes open to a kingdom where humanity hails the author. But then, impaled. You see, love is just words until action prevails, and this point is proven by blood drawn by nails, and squaring up sin and death, the author wails, it is finished. But that's just the finale of season 6, because in season 7's a box full of tricks. The author smashes death in the face with a spade, because hell cannot hold his loving tirade. And for 2,000 years, the story continues. Get yourself plugged in, like there's nothing to lose. So reach for your settings and turn your Li-Fi on, because the author is still speaking. His heart is still beating. And the story is love, and with it he frees us. Because the author has a name, and his name is Jesus. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Before the storyboard of history, God is. His initial existence precedes his innovative expression. Before he is creative, he is constant. Before sunsets and selfies, baboons and Bieber, horses, chestnuts and horse chestnuts, God is. And out of the relationship of Father, Son and Holy Spirit come a yearning for relationship. God is love. And God is seeking an object for his affection. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God creates and he saves the best until last. We are the pinnacle of God's creation. Our story begins, and it is in perfect step with God's story. Creator and creation in sync. This is how it was meant to be. Our fathers, our forefathers walk with God in the cool of the day. But this connection in heaven doesn't last long. The Bible's opening chapters portray paradise created and lost. Our ancestors famously made some bad fruit choices. At its core, pun intended, is disobedience, rebellion and a lack of trust in the Creator, and like a virus it invades our hearts and is passed from generation to generation to generation. From the moment we messed up as a human race, the cry of our story has been, we want to rewind. We know that all is not well between us and God. The heart of the human problem is the problem of the human heart. But God's story also has a cry, and he is in hot pursuit of relationship with his creation. Adam and Eve have children, and the earth is populated, but the spirit of rebellion in their descendants is alive and well. The story is rebooted via Noah and his boat, and then enter a nomadic farmer called Abram. God changes Abram's name and tells this 99-year-old that he's going to be a dad. His son Isaac has a son called Jacob, who has a few sons, one of which is a young dreamer with a famous coat called Joseph, the son, not the coat. Joseph saves his family from famine by gaining favour with the Egyptian royal family. And Team Jacob move to Egypt and become so numerous and influential there that they become a threat. The next passenger on our biblical tour bus is Moses, who should have been killed at birth but escapes via a basket down a river to become an Egyptian prince. Has an encounter with God, moves over 1 million people to the edge of a promised land via a sea that splits in half, and then sets up the rules of engagement through which God will relate to his people for the next 100 years. And then the people forget the story. But God has not given up the chase. Judges have some eye-watering adventures involving swords disappearing into obese men's stomachs, tent pegs driven into army commanders' heads, and the better-known victories of little Gideon and shaggy-haired Samson. Then, a king. God reluctantly agrees to let them have one, and Saul falls in and then out of favour to tee up the glory years of the people of God under King David. After defeating Goliath and 10 years on the run, the song-writing, harp-playing, battle-winning, an occasional adulterer and murderer becomes the kingdom's greatest king. Israel seems set for years of prosperity and favour. But by the time David's grandson is on the throne, the story is forgotten again. The kingdom that David rules splits into two, with kings varying wildly in their godliness. Prophets persistently insist on godly living, but also they do something else. They look forward to a new day, a new kingdom brought in by a different kind of king. And when you sift through the writings of bleak and imminent judgment, there are quiet hints of someone coming, whispers of hope. And then 400 years of silence. Between the books of Matthew and Malachi, nothing. The people of God are occupied by competing empires and passed like a war trophy from the Babylonians to the Persians, from the Persians to the Greeks, from the Greeks to the Romans. And under Roman rule, at the time of Roman census, a baby is born. The author enters the story as a baby. And like a master artist with the brushstrokes of his life, Jesus paints a portrait of what God looks like. His compassion for the broken, his passion for people to be right with God, his wisdom to unearth the deepest truths of life, his power to defy the laws of nature, his grace to uplift those downtrodden by society, and his forgiveness to restore to others when he has been mistreated. His life alone marks him out as the most significant figure in human history, and yet he is best remembered for his death. And when he dies, Jesus takes upon himself the sin of the world, all of our mess, all of our guilt, all of our shame and sin, past, present and future. They die with him. Our rebellion and brokenness that had previously been a barrier between us and God are destroyed in a cosmic moment of forgiveness. And for some, this looks like the end of the story. But then dawn breaks on Easter Day. Darkness quakes and shadows give way to the light. See, resurrection's the plan, it's why God sent him. And the comeback's on, there's a change of momentum. The powers of damnation in previous jubilation have been hushed and crushed by the Lord of creation. See, he takes the hit, stands where we should have stood, and that's why we call Friday good. And he's back with life and with us and blessed, and that's why we can know it as Sunday best. So to the 4-0 down, to the backs against the wall, listen to his rallying resurgent call. And to those up against it in brokenness and pain, Easter's story roars, we go again. So thine be the glory, death's lost its sting. Here's to Jesus, the comeback king. Then, the next chapter of God's story is about the beginnings of an international family. How they defied the odds of survival, a ragtag bunch of illiterate fishermen, dodgy tax collectors, women of dubious reputation and feuding brothers on the run from the authorities whilst mourning the loss of their leader. The church, currently 2 billion strong and growing, started from this unlikely rabble. Never bet against the story of God or the God of the story. This new movement continues against the odds. A bombastic Jewish scholar called Saul, a determined Christian exterminator, has an encounter with Jesus and devotes his life to spreading God's story all over southern Europe. With the help of a few friends, he plants churches wherever he goes and then writes letters to teach and inspire them. These words resonate today as loud as ever. The Bible finishes with a vision of the future. The promise that a new day is coming, with no more hunger or thirst, and the wiping of every tear from every eye. There is an end to the story, so good it will satisfy every reader. Every cliffhanger settled, every mystery resolved, all made well and happily ever after. But it is not yet, and until it comes, God's story continues. So reach for your settings and turn your Li-Fi on, because the author is still speaking, his heart is still beating, and his story is love, and with it he frees us, because the author has a name, and his name is Jesus.